Hello there, and welcome to Preprints in Motion, the podcast taking a deep dive in the fast-paced world of preprints.
Join us as we sit down with early career researchers, discuss their latest preprint, and find out about their journey through the muddy marshes of academia.
Hit that subscribe button, leave a rating, and find us on Twitter @MotionPod. Support us by heading over to buymeacoffee.com/preprints. But for now, let's get into the show.
And this week we have two exceptional leaders in the effort to make academia a better place for all. Gracielle is currently an ASAP Bio Fellow and Programme Coordinator at BIOS 2, and Mayank is President of the Harvard Medical Postdoc Association and advocate for mental health awareness, equity, and much, much more. This is going to be a good one, I think. It's going to be a good rant. I feel like I should have a drink for this one. It's going to be potentially quite heavy. We're not going to shy away from any of the topics that we need to talk about. But we will start with everyone introducing themselves. And I guess Sónia should probably introduce herself first, because this is I'm going to make you talk, sorry, on the podcast. This is Sonia's first thing we've done together since she's joined the team. So I guess you should go first and let everyone know who you are.
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone, I'm Sónia. I'm a Portuguese postdoc and I currently work in Geneva, Switzerland. My background is mostly in plant science, so from genetics, genomics, and epigenetics. I did a PhD in plant cell biology, and then I moved away to Switzerland, where I'm now doing my postdoc in structural cell biology, but this time in human cells. Overall, I just really like to read all cool science that people are doing. And yeah, obviously I'm a big supporter for preprints and open science, or else I guess I will not be here. Yeah, and I really just like this idea of hearing from the people who actually do the experiments, showing that they have other passions, other hobbies, and also see how the stories come together. So yeah, I'm looking forward for helping out in whatever I can.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about early career researchers, the things that affect us, not me for much longer, because I'm getting out. And generally what we can do about them, what needs to be done, why they need to change. All the stuff we touch upon, generally episodes anyway. So why don't our two wonderful guests introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Gracielle. I'm based in Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada, but I'm from Brazil. So my whole training as a scientist was made there, just the end bits was made here in Canada. So I got this perspective of Latin American science and Canadian science. How does it go for ECRs? Right now, I am on my second postdoc. I just started last week. And my postdoc is 80% coordinating a program to train other ECRs, other grad students on open science and how to transition out of academia. Because we try to have trainings and have discussions on other skills or the skills they have in research that are useful for other jobs. So how to kind of have this perspective on, for example, how to do environmental assessment, environmental impact assessment, and how to do consultancy or how to do those kind of stuff that we do in industry. And I also started a fellowship with ASAP Bio, and one of the projects that we are thinking about is how to get grad programs to accept preprints as a way to graduate, because some programs, the one that I was in my master's, for example, they required us to submit a paper for like a high tier journal, and that's just insane because then you rush to submit a paper that you don't even like just to fill a requirement for your grad program.
Do you like any paper when you're at the point of submitting it? Or you're not? I'm always sick of it by that point. I just want it gone.
Yeah. I mean, some of them I like, but all the papers that I've ever published, they were preprints before, so I have this process of enjoying it and having discussions and reshaping it until I don't want to see it anymore. So yeah, so that's what I do.
Hi, I'm Mayank. I'm a postdoc in the Department of Systems Biology in the lab of Sean Medicine at Harvard Med School. I'm originally from India. I did my grad, so I had a dual BSMS degree in India, and then I moved to Germany in Tübingen where I did my PhD. And then afterwards I moved to Boston here to do my postdoc. And now, of course, with my postdoc, I've taken on a lot of additional work, pretty much like Jonny, just realizing how much needs to be sort of reformed in the system that we are in. And I think most of it is sort of directed towards equity and inclusion. Yeah, I guess that's about it. I mean, it's not that I started to, become active in the community while only in the postdoc or while in the US. I think I've always been active since my school, but the level has been different. Like there, the concern was like student body president and, school captain and stuff like that. And then I move on to sort of, smaller clubs during undergrad and stuff like that. And then moving on to ASAP bio actually during my PhD in Germany, starting, preprint journal clubs in the department and in the institution. It was amazing. And then I think here, the challenges are somehow more pronounced. And also I think partly because now I'm a postdoc, and I think it's just, the idea became real. Like, you have always known what is supposed to be this way. And as you become postdoc, things become like really real. So, and I think now I'm in the system and I kind of knew where the shortcomings of the system was. And I think I was a bit naive in thinking, oh, you know what, I can actually work and, work towards it, corral people, we can do better, stuff like that. It was more like very naive point of view. And I think now I realize it is actually a lot of work, and seeing all my colleagues as postdocs, mostly suffer. And I think all I can do is just, sort of stand in the solidarity and try to sort of push the system in acknowledging the things that need to be changed while I do science. So I think that's what my current status is.
Mostly suffer is a really good description of the postdoc experience, just generally. It is one long suffering period. With lots of good bits, because I get accused of being negative if I don't say that bit. I do like that it is Jessica who seems to link all of us together here, actually. Which really goes to show just how important those kind of initiatives are. We'll probably come round to ASAP Bio and eLife, as we always do on this show for some reason. We'll come around to those at some point. And you've just touched upon one of the questions I was going to ask, which is how you got into sort of the activism side of academia. Because when you come through, I think it does take you to really experience what it's actually like and to live it, to understand how important it is to do that. And like you, before that, I kind of got into a lot of those roles without thinking about it. And it's only now I've started to put active thought into putting myself in these positions that it really, you end up taking on a huge amount of work, because there is a huge amount of work to be done. So how did you both find your way into the activism part, and how do you find balancing that with being a postdoc? Because I often struggle to do that. I don't have a balance. What am I saying?
Well, for me, I think I never thought that I was doing activism, but I was, So every time that I tried to promote a different workshop for grad students that was about open science, preprints and things like that, I was doing activism because it was something different from the culture, and I was trying to implement new ideas that the grad program, for example, was not aware of, or they were not recognizing. And the students were having, they were getting in touch with this new perspective of doing things, and they started kind of questioning, so why does this grad program is the way it is if there's this other way of doing things? I think the most important thing for me in my career in this perspective was getting involved with the Mozilla Foundation projects, because I was involved in the Mozilla Open Leaders program, and then this got me in contact with a lot of people in the movement, and then I started to be active in these programs, in these projects, the pre-review with Daniela. She was my mentor in the Mozilla Open Leader, so it was kind of natural that I started doing those things, and I was seen as not an outlier, like a weirdo in the grad program, because I was always doing this open science stuff, not only my thesis, like because all of my colleagues were so focused on the thesis because of the pressure, it's not their fault, it's like the system. And I was always trying to get out. And then it turned out that it was activism, and it actually gave me the opportunity to have my jobs after my PhD. So that's why I ended up doing a postdoc after my PhD that was focused on open science and teaching open science, and now a second one that is also related to open science. So it's funny how in grad school I was, how can I say that? Not encouraged to do things other than my thesis, but that's the thing that gave me jobs afterwards.
Me too, actually. The took a while, but I've been interviewing for the past couple of weeks, and maybe they're not. Maybe this is a criticism, but I'm taking it as a compliment. But everyone so far has said I have a very interesting CV, which it's a weird way to phrase that. But it's an interview, so I assume that's a good thing.
Is that for the US jobs? Because interesting is a different, interesting choice of word.
It's all UK ones, but I don't know whether it's like your British sarcasm there, but they're all British jobs at the minute. But yeah, it does come up that it's because my CV, if you look at it, it looks like I'm just all over the place. Because I can't help myself to say yes to everything, which is partially true, but it is actually it's always been a deliberate effort to jump around a lot. So how about you? You've talked about how you got into it, but how do you find the experience of balancing the two things?
Oh, me balancing? That's I think very much like you. I think it has been, a constant fight of sort of balancing these two things. And I think one thing that I've realized by now is that I do have a very soft spot for social justice. And I think this is where I intrinsically derive passion and motivation from. But it's kind of nice because sometimes in science you have, ups and downs in motivation in the lab. And, so if I keep working on that aspect where I do have motivation, that kind of feeds into my science in a way. So I think that's kind of a very nice perspective. But balancing, I find, for example, I have started to learn how to have effective meetings, as in how quickly I can actually try to get what I want in the meeting. Especially the non-sciencey ones, because this is where I'm doing most of the unpaid labor. And then try to sort it out my calendar in a way where, for example, I have sort of extra postdoc appointments either early in the morning or late in the afternoon, outside my work hours, or sort of appointing a specific day of the week that this is when I do all that work and I do not do rest of the, so trying to sort my calendar that way. And I think the most difficult things have been two. The first is saying no. Jonny, you probably understand that very much, right? Saying
yes,
no
it's
because
just such a good word.
Yes, it's such a good word, and I think it's some of it is, of course, personality, right? Like, you do want to help people. I think probably it's also true for you as well as a person. It just says a lot about that person. Secondly, it comes from culture as well. So in India, for example, as growing up, you actually show up for people constantly. You do not. You actually sacrifice your own time and well-being, but you show up for others. That's what I've learned. So that's something that I'm working on to sort of recognize and appreciate my boundaries and bandwidth and say this is I cannot afford this, so I have to draw that boundary. And I think the second thing that I'm learning to be better at is delegating. And I also like to be involved in all the time in the process, which kind of sounds very weird. Like, if I were to be the PI, right, you will just be like, oh, he's a micromanaging one. But but, I'm learning that there is a border of freedom, which I have learned through my term at postdoc association here at Harvard Med. But it is nice. It is nice to sort of work around where the boundary really should be.
It's hard. It is hard to do, and it is. I mean, for me, I guess mainly because I am leaving, that my lab work, I just don't care about it really anymore. There's something that we're probably gonna have to cut out. But the thing I love doing is all that other stuff I do, which I'm effectively doing 2 full-time jobs now and applying for jobs, which is a job in itself. And it's just, I mean, I'm off all of next month pretty much on holiday because I'm so burnt out and I'm done. If I don't take time off, I don't think I'll be able to do another job.
Yeah, I mean, it's an enormous amount of work.
It is. And I think a lot of people don't see that and they don't necessarily appreciate that. Because, as you both alluded to, people in science are very focused on their one thing they do. So, one of the things I have found in doing this extra stuff, not only is there a bit of a disconnect in terms of the people I work with, how they understand it and perceive it, I think we're all a bit up our own arses a little bit in science, where we like to rank sciences, right? So, you've got the physicists who think they're amazing, they're better than the chemists who think they're better than the biologists, and then we think we're better than psychologists.
Oh my god, I hate that so much. Okay, maybe hate is a very strong word, but I hate that very, very much.
It's a load of rubbish, but everyone seems to do it. And one of the outcomes of that is that all of the extra stuff we do is seen as social sciences, and then the people who do the lab work just dismiss it. It's not that difficult to do. It's not that important. When if they try and do it, they'd soon realise it's actually very difficult to do. But one of the things I found, other than that, is that you get a certain group of people who give you quite a lot of backlash for doing it. And there's a lot of barriers and people who ultimately the things we try and do here are to benefit other postdocs. Well, everyone in academia, but certainly for me, it's primarily aimed at early career researchers. And it's really weird to come up against people who you're trying to help who block you and block your efforts. I mean, last year I came off Twitter for a while because I'd had enough. So how do you both do you both come up against that, and how do you kind of navigate that? How does that impact what you do?
You mean when people do not value the kind of side work?
That can be one of the way it comes out, yeah.
Yeah, I've got that quite a bit since, at least since I was doing my PhD, because I was doing a lot of science communication, and people are like, oh, you can't do both. You need to choose one. And it's always like that. I'm always trying to do a lot of stuff because of the circumstances, not really because I choose to do sometimes. So, for example, now I'm immigrating to Canada, and being a postdoc and an immigrant is very much an unstable situation. So you need to kind of have a lot of things on your menu to try to get stability in one way or another, either in immigration or in your job or both. And people were like, what are you going to do? You need to focus on your CV and have a goal. But sometimes from my life right now, I can't have a focus because I can't really choose, I need to try to apply to a lot of things. So for me, it's really, there are things in life that are way more important than caring about the backlash of people, because there are these things that are really serious, like immigrating and being able to live somewhere. Because going back to Brazil is not an option for me right now. And it wasn't until this year with the new elections, at least. And the situation for scientists there is even worse than in Canada. Yeah. So here we have more options to be a postdoc, not only in academia, but we can have these fellowships of postdocs in industry. We have a way to transition more easily. We have more opportunities in general than in Brazil right now as a scientist, as a PhD degree holder, So yeah, I learned to not listen to these things, because if I had listened to it, I was not finished my PhD. I had not finished my PhD.
For me, I feel it's been always this case. As I mentioned, like, it's always been something extra, has always been sort of my way of life from schooling. But I think I'm also being very stubborn somehow. I do listen to them, but at the same time, I decide to ignore that choice. And it also somehow reflects in me, like, where the values of these persons reside. And I think, so I've tried to sort of identify myself with people who care about community as much as they do about science. And I think, like, landing this postdoc position, I think it was very, very important to me that I would be in a space where people understand me as a person than as a scientist. And I really, really feel privileged to be in this lab, and I really, really admire my PI. And I think there have been times, of course, some of these weeks your extra work sort of comes along and you cannot do probably as much of science work, right? And then you feel slightly guilty about it. And one of the piece of advice that I've gotten from one of my friends and colleagues who was a postdoc back in the lab, and now she's an assistant professor at Duke, Akanshi Minjol, she said that, it is a part of postdoc. Like, why are you actually delineating these two parts? You are doing important work. The fact that we have been seeing only science as the important academic work is what is wrong. This is exactly what you're trying to fix, and we have to start seeing the other thing. So you should not be feeling guilty about it. And I think that somehow flipped certain things in my head. And I've started to that have given me peace and sort of reduce that guilt you always used to carry with it. So I think that's been sort of an eye-opener. And yeah, I think I just try to keep those people who might be backlashy at the borderline. I do respect them, but my values might be different from theirs.
I mean, that's how I approach it, is that I just see it as part of what we should all be doing. It shouldn't be the separate thing.
Exactly.
It just is sadly seen as that quite often, and it's definitely not rewarded in the same way. So you're kind of both like on fire at the minute. You're both doing amazing stuff. You're kind of putting me to shame.
No, I can't compete with you, Jonny.
As I was saying this earlier as well, actually. One of the things that I think, coming back to ASAP Bio and eLife, the ambassador program, one of the things they do really well is that they get a bunch of people who are passionate and active together. But one of the things that they could both do and should be doing much more of is then sort of platforming those people and giving them the lifting them up enough so they can go out and have like a real impact, because then they will do the same for the next person to come along, and that's kind of how you bring about change. So I'm kind of sad that I might have to all stop if I get a normal job. But it's really good to see that, and to see people like both of you who are coming up through those programs or have done them, and then what we'll then go on to be doing next. Because, I mean, you're right, Mayank is writing a whole bunch of stuff at the minute, all around sort of diversity and inclusion, and it's all great. The postdoc stuff you're doing with the committee there is all producing a lot of really good stuff, and it's a model for other people to come along and do it, right? And then with the open science stuff, a whole training program for grad students is exactly what we need. And I'm always amazed we don't have those kind of things. And again, it's the next people are going to do even better. And it's really nice to see. So I think for a bit of structure, we're going to go through open science, and then we're going to do diversity, and then we're going to do the toxic, horrible stuff. So could we just a bit of focus on open science, and to live up to the name of the podcast? Why is it that you both are supportive of preprints, and what impact you see preprints having on, well, I would say on the entire academic venture, but anything from what you want to comment on, from careers up to how we do science? That was a very open-ended question, sorry.
Okay. I see a lot of benefits and good things about preprints. I usually tell the story of when I was in high school and my sister was in the university, and she showed me how to do research for her assignments in the university. And she showed me the Cielo network. So there's this open science, open access papers from Latin America, and I was always intrigued by why is not the paper is written in Portuguese if we are in Brazil and this researcher is a Brazilian. And I was always questioning access in this sense. So we have the access to the paper, but we don't have the access to the information because it's another language. And I think Preprints is a way to kind of solve this problem a bit because we have at least the access to the papers. And sometimes they have abstracts in other languages because the journals don't want to accept that. So you can have that in the preprints. We can have even the whole paper in another language if it's a preprint. And I think it's really important for ECRs in particular to be involved and to post preprints because it shows the community, the society, the things that they are doing, which is their currency. It's how they show they are doing their jobs. And they are always being required to publish. And the publishing system takes the whole grad school. Sometimes it takes 2 years, 3 years to publish a paper. And if we have to wait for journals, you won't show people what you're doing. And for grad students, that's really, really important. And also the other thing is the discussion aspect of science that preprints bring, because you are showing something that you did, and people are being invited to comment on it, to see it before it is like judged by 1 or 2 people. And you have this conversation, you have the opportunity to improve, to change the version, and to, have this conversation as a community of science. So that's why I'm super in love with preprints.
I mean, I absolutely agree with what you just said, Gracielle. For ECR, of course, it's the most important given the current structure of academia, right? Like the university and institutes and how these sort of structures really work. We have huge power dynamics, right? And how people, based on their position, should be treated and what rights do they have. And I think, for example, I think I was mentioning this recently in the NIH listening session on open access from postdocs' point of view. Postdocs do not actually have sort of similar voice and similar authority if you were to actually reach out to ask for some reagents or something. They're more likely to be honored if the PI, if they're coming, such emails are coming from senior scientists or PIs and stuff. So there's already why we actually have that barrier in the first place if we want to actually benefit science. Like, there is no need to have that. So so power dynamics is just one aspect of it. I think one of my favorite aspect is, of course, equity aspect, because to me it seems like it's a lot more than what the institution is. The institution is what I'm trying to focus on, but at the equity is actually more at the broader or more holistic level. It comes down to socio-economic, political power of the West. So when we talk about equity, most of the equity organizations are located in the West, and we talk about, hey, actually benefiting, removing poverty, and doing, curing illnesses in the continent of Africa, or in South America, or in India, or in most of these other countries down in global South. But the access is still limited. The access still is in the West. So how do you actually expect those people to be benefited? How do you expect science to be prospering in Africa or in South America or in most of Southeast Asia if you do not have access? Scientists do not have access to these papers. And preprints actually, they are open. This is by chance, they are open access, which means everybody can use them. And secondly, going back to the ECR connection, we do not have money. Most of the people do not have money. And this is such a capitalistic system where we are basically paying. For example, sometimes they want $10,000 to publish a paper, which is absolutely insane. That is probably, 5 years of salary for some people down in global South. That is absolutely insane amount of money. So yeah, postdocs do not have their own funding. So, if you have, and if they are free, which is preprints really are, it is free for the researcher, which is amazing. It is actually, we do not have to go through this year-long process of, going through at the editorial desk, and it is out there. We have seen the importance of preprints during COVID. Like, the whole world came together. Literally, within 1 year, we have literally a vaccine. This is a miracle, right? Like, it just blows your mind that how scientists can come together, and when the science is actually open and unlimited. And I think that preprints have shown to us very nicely during this. And I think during the pandemic, but I think, and we shouldn't be actually keeping it bordered anymore. I think this was an instance of like how preprints can be wonderfully useful, and why we should have them. Like, we must have them. And plus, it's transparency. Like, hello. Should we just once again, again, I don't know how much time we have to go through the opaque systems of peer review, but like that, with ASAP Bio and Dora and, eLife ambassadors all working towards, creating a lot more transparent culture and transparent peer review process where with, PubPeer and all that, you basically have these reviews coming out and encouraging them open. Like, anybody can actually come around and review a paper. Why it has to be restricted to somebody specific that editor is going to send out, and those reviewers are not going to be paid? I mean, again, I don't know if that makes sense, but
you can get people who can comment on a single aspect of a preprint because they're an expert, right? And then you've got some really valuable insight that you wouldn't have otherwise had. Because when I get peer reviews to come through, I'm not an expert on the whole thing. I can comment on bits, which is what I do, but you need a bunch of other people to then come along. Whereas if you make it open, like a preprint, just everyone can comment freely. Sometimes they're not all very nice, as we discovered, but mostly they're very nice. COVID was about 25% in the first year of the COVID literature was all pre-printed, so it was a huge boost for preprints. And one of the things we've kind of found is, so before COVID, preprints were about 3 to 4% of the biomedical literature, and now they're around sort of 6 to 10, depending on where you look. And that is the COVID boost, but it is now kind of plateaued out, and it needs another push to go up again.
Well, that's what we are here for, and I think, we should probably, and mostly thank Preprints in Motion, at least it's, stirring in the community, so you're doing a great job, Jonny.
I think Jessica and everyone else is doing a great job. I'm just here to chat.
Fair enough.
Go ahead. I was just going to add one thing that I was thinking as Mayank was talking about equity and accessibility. I've been thinking, so for example, in Brazil, you have these organisms from the government that regulate the grad programs and scientific production and all that. So they have kind of their own impact factor, let's say. So they classify journals in their own classifying system that nobody understands really well. And you are evaluated as a researcher based on where do you publish your papers. And so the scientific community has been, in Brazil, very concerned about open access because of the APCs, the article process charges. Because for us, it's impossible to publish a paper with APC in dollars, so it's really, really expensive. And they are like, open access, it's not worth it. Open access is bad. And I think Preprints gives us a tool to try to change that, because it's open access and you don't have to pay for it. So it's another way for researchers to publish their research in open access. So it's not that we can't change what the government says or how the government regulates research and give grants and things like that. But we have this tool of preprints that can help us have a strategy to change that and not be only based on APCs and open access, golden open access.
The APC is horrible. I hate it. It's and the thing is, it primarily impacts everyone who's not sort of Western science. Yeah. But even those of us who are, getting back to the postdoc part, if and this is what we had when we did the COVID work. Because I was leading that, I was the most junior person on that team, but because I was the one leading it, it was kind of my responsibility to figure out how to publish it. And postdocs don't get money to pay APCs. There's no pot we can apply for to do that either. It's not our job, right? It's not what we're meant to do. Yeah. Which is another issue. But even people who are, I mean, I'm straight, white, male, living in the UK, middle-ish class now. I couldn't really ask for any more privilege. I've got as much privilege as I could really get. And even I can struggle. And if I'm struggling, then there's a huge problem in the system. Because it's designed by people like me, for me. No, not for me. I like to think I'm not one of those people. But it is, it shows just how bad things are if that's that kind of person is struggling.
Where do I find out about the different bioarchive licenses? This CC, BY, CDXY nonsense is driving me nuts.
ASAP Bio have a resource for that.
Ugh, that's your answer for everything.
That's because they have everything you need to know about preprints.
Sure, they probably have the basics, like info on the preprint servers, but what else is there?
There's so much more. Looking to post a preprint, but not sure what different journal policies are? They have a collection to help you out with that. There are meetings around preprints and associated services. If you want to know how preprint adoption has changed over time, there's even a page on that.
And COVID?
They have a big section on preprints and the pandemic, plus some really cool infographics for communicating preprints.
And university policies? Surely they don't have that.
They collect uni policies where possible.
Okay, they do sound pretty impressive, but is it not a bit of an echo chamber?
It can be, but ASAP Bio also engage with people who don't love preprints and have concerns. So we had an excellent discussion on this very topic a couple of months ago.
Oh, is there anything ASAP Bio don't do?
Honestly, no, they're so nice over there. They were so quick to jump in and support this show. It's your one-stop shop for info on preprints and open science initiatives, so head over to asapbio.org to learn more and subscribe to their newsletter for the latest in preprint news. If you want a deeper dive into the world of preprints, then look out for the next recruitment of ASAP Bio Fellows.
And coming to the diversity aspect of it, preprints obviously open it up a lot more. And I would love to see, so bioarchive, for example, they don't allow you to publish in different languages. They only allow English, although I have seen some that aren't in English on there. But I would love to see someone come up with a tool that will translate them for you, which is something a journal would never do. But the preprint servers will do eventually. And I think Richard has spoken about it before, where they would quite like to try it out if someone came up with something that was robust. So, kind of moving away a little bit from open science, but diversity is a really, really important part of everything, and it's the thing that society as a whole is, I don't want to say reckoning with, because I'm not, maybe I'm just really skeptical. I don't think as a society we do anywhere near as good at a job at dealing with any of the issues around diversity as we do. So I'm not overly convinced we're coming to a reckoning, but it is something that, particularly in the US news, is a very much at the forefront. But what would you like to see in terms of the diversity aspect in academia? How could we collectively do better on that? And I appreciate that is a big question. There's not an easy answer to it either. But if you had an unlimited pot of money, how would you tackle that problem? That's a thinker, isn't it?
Yeah, lots of thinking here. I mean, it is in every aspect. This is what bothers me and excites me and infuriates me and motivates me at the same time. It is at every single aspect. We are tied to elitism and privilege so tightly, like from the point when we are basically recruiting people, be it undergrad, be it grad, be it postdocs, be it faculty. We are tied to those matrix that are embedded in exclusion. And, there's a history of that. And like diluting that, or sort of even reducing those barriers, and realizing that there are people out there who do not have that privilege, who come from different set of resources and lack accessibility. There has to be awareness around it along all the steps in terms of recruitment, just the culture, so you can retain them, you support them, you understand them, you make them feel that they belong in those spaces. You have acknowledgement, rewards, and recognition for the amount of work they do in creating those spaces even better. And then you have like promotion and whatever, tenure track and stuff like that. I mean, it's everywhere. It's just pervasive, and this is just one aspect of the institutional system. And then you have roles of course, funders and publishers, how they can come in, because they're so important stakeholders in this aspect. And I think, speaking of preprints, they actually they are amazing because they reduce all those barriers. You are not really tied up to discretion of an editor knowing the institution affiliation or the author where this paper comes out and sending out for review or not. Like, this is amazing because you do not have that barrier. You're just putting it out for science for everybody, and that is amazing. This is what we should be doing. I can go on forever, but I'll let Gracielle go ahead, speak, and share their views.
Please do go on forever. I'm super pessimistic about it because, from my point of view, like, I don't know if academia would resist a diverse environment. Like, for me, it's like you have to burn it down and build it again because it is designed to be excludent. But one thing that I noticed, for example, in Brazil, we have a lot of active policies of going after minorities and trying to bring them actively, so you have this specific job vacancies for Black people, Indigenous people, and here in Canada I feel like they are more like, oh, we really would like that to apply but they don't go after these people and really take care of this process. And also after they are in, what do you do? So, because they will be suffering all the things that they suffer outside of academia. So you need to take care of that too. So I think that's a really good thing that we have there in Brazil. And universities, we recently started to do that in grad programs too, in grad school. So we have specific selective process for Black students and minorities in general. And we also recognize as a public policy in Brazil that this is bigger than just having the vacancies, So it's a social problem, and it's a social thing that we need to tackle. So some public policies, they have these connections between education, public health, income, and all that. And that's how we actually can be successful. And I think if we are going to achieve a diverse academia environment someday, I think it should go this way, like not just being, oh, we are inclusive, we have a code of conduct, how good we are. And
you're hitting on something really good there.
Yeah, and really being active and recognize that it's not a punctual thing, it's more a context.
So I don't know if it was the journalist or if it was Eilish. It might have been Eilish. Eilish is great. Community manager. I can't remember who it is who said this, but it was talking about that. It was the URM article that Nature are currently working on. So Mayank was interviewed as part of that, and whoever it was, one of the things he said was, you were really big on the B, so DEIB, and I think that's what you've both kind of touched on, that idea of belonging. And you can do all these initiatives, but if a person doesn't feel like they belong, I mean, the benefit's limited, right? Because these people, I wouldn't stay somewhere if I didn't feel like I belonged. I wouldn't do my best work if I didn't belong. So it might be worth just chatting a bit more about that and why that is so important, and how, again, taking British white man out of it. Everyone I see in academia looks like me. I look up and it's all older versions of me. So, I mean, how do you both feel? Because one of the things we're doing at the moment is, one of the documentaries we're doing is a EDI series. So we've just wrapped up, or we're about tonight actually wrapping up the interviews with women in science, to try and get at their experiences, what they perceive, how they just feel being in academia. And then we'll move on to we're doing it in other groups as well. So let's just talk a little bit about belonging and why it's important?
I mean, it is. I do not know. I think probably this is something, we always want to connect with whose experiences we can actually relate with. This is very important to humans as a species. This is how, Homo sapiens, that book basically by Harari actually mentions that. I mean, this is something intrinsic to us as animals, that we want to be sharing our experiences with people. And if you realize that you're in the same space, of course, with white background, mostly white background with privilege and money, of course, you're going to go together, maybe play some golf. Yeah, sure, sounds like it. But there are people out there, it used to be women who outcasted. Now that has started to get better, but still not at the same level. Now talking about different groups. Now, if you feel, we know that there is a lack of racial representation, and racial is just one aspect of diversity. There's a lot of aspects of diversity that we don't even talk about. Speaking from an institutional point of view, having 4 different sort of skin tones on a pamphlet of a university does not make it inclusive. Inclusion is different from diversity, and belonging is something that ties everything together. It comes from a place of culture, it comes from a place of transparency, and it comes from a culture of accountability. For example, what would be amazing is to actually have an accountability for our own actions and behavior. We should all be doing implicit bias tests, and there's nothing wrong with that. The culture that we live in, the media that we are exposed to constantly, we are biased towards one thing or the other. And these things can change if we train them. For example, this Professor Mahzarin Banerjee at Harvard, she's created this implicit bias tests. One can actually go onto that website and, just recognize what their biases are towards different sort of things. And know that when, for example, you are assessing a candidate for a specific job, and when you're talking to somebody in the lab, know what your biases are. You know that you're not saying something wrong or derogatory or discriminatory to them, even though you didn't mean it, but that could come off as very, very wrong. So I think if you can actually hold yourself accountable, it probably would be a better way. And I think now, speaking that, having a transparent and open communication about it in lab settings, in department settings, in institutional settings can be a really good start, at least in this particular section. And then all things that minority want to see is that institutions and people actually care. And I think the reason people do not retain or decide to quit out is because they feel people are not supporting them, right? This is the whole point. They just do not feel supported enough. On top of all the, excruciating pain and frustrating, process of academia and, all that precariousness of academia really is, all you need is a backbone. And if you do not have that community to support you, you do not feel a sense of belonging in that space, because people don't understand your culture, your experiences, what do you have to do to get there, and all the things that you go through. And you're, on top of that, you're again biased and discriminated and bullied and gaslighted and manipulated in having those experiences, which is, of course, this is toxicity. So I don't know if that answered really the question of belonging, but I think a more transparent and accountable system is a way to go ahead from individual to community level, and a lot of open communication around it.
So coming back to the open science training program for grad students, one of the things I think academia ironically does terribly is training anyone who's not longer an undergraduate student, basically. Because so in the UK, we don't have any formal training for graduate students. We go straight into the lab, and your PI might train you, but that's not common either. And by train, I don't mean show you how to do the lab work you need to do your current job. I mean training in how the system works, in how publishing works, how to do a peer review. And you don't actually get training in that. Journal clubs, by the way, are not training in peer review. Mm-hmm. Not in the way they're currently done.
That's correct.
Sick of saying that. I work with people who seem to think it is. It's not. We're going to have to take that out as well. So coming back to that, Gracielle, do you see a place where we could fit all this into a big joint training program that every grad student gets put through, so that we all have that same kind of awareness of how things are actually working?
Yeah, from my perspective, open science can be included in all the disciplines that the courses that they do. So everyone in my area, at least like in ecology, everyone has to go through like a basic maths or statistics course. And this is the place to learn how to do reproducible analysis and all that. But the most how's that is the invisible curriculum, hidden curriculum, something like that. This is more, I see this happening more through mentoring. So if you have a structure in academia where you can have a mentor, even if it's not a PI, if it's another grad student, and they can not teach you, but give you some tips and tricks on how to do things and how things work. I see some labs have this culture of writing a wiki, so everything that a grad student learns, how the university works, they go there and document for the next student. I think that's super cool. So it's more like a culture and community sense that you have to build in academia, so you pass on this knowledge. But in terms of formal training, I think all the courses have the potential to have, because open science is more like a way to do things. It's on your values, on your principles. It's not really a technique. I used to say that, like in my past postdoc, we have these short courses that were super tight, created around open science. So we were going to learn how to use Git and how to use R Markdown to do reproducible reports. But I see a lot of these things are available online. You just have to Google it and copy paste some comments. These you don't have to learn. You have to learn how to make decisions and how to manage a group of researchers, So how to do that using version control. How do you delegate? How do you create branch names and things like that? And these things is a more broader skill that is not technical. It's more, it has to do with your relationship with people, how to manage how to be a leader without being like a powerhouse or things like that. So I think for me, what I see in academia is that we lack this perspective that things are multi and transdisciplinary. We are always trying to put things in the smaller and smaller boxes and trying to train grad students in these things that are super technical that they don't really need to learn. And also there's this kind of a syndrome that I see that they are always trying to teach things in the super basic level. And then students don't feel always confident to go to another level and be leaders, and to like be advanced. So they are always trying, let's not go to the deeps of version control. Let's just learn how to do branch and push and pull and, just get the basics to not scare students. But students are willing to learn those things. So that's my bit, like go advanced and go transdisciplinary.
Yeah, I agree.
So I find the use of leader very interesting in the sarcastical sense there in academia, because so in the UK, a lot of our grants and fellowships have the word leader in them. So UKRI does future leaders. Having worked with some of those, they're leading absolutely nothing. But what we don't do in the academic career structure is what every other job does, where you promote people based on their ability to do the job they're moving into. Whereas in academia, you become a PI because you've written a grant that happens to get funded. That's where you get your fellowship from. Not because you've shown you're capable of running a lab or managing people or doing any of the things you're now going to do, just based on your ability to write a grant and do lab work. You're not going to be doing any more lab work. You will be writing a lot more grants. But obviously, open science has a way into changing that a little bit. But it comes back to the values and what we think of as important. And if we promote people based on those values instead of just their science output, I would think that would help diversity efforts as well, because then you would have people moving up who should be moving up. Because a lot of grants are luck. I mean, there's a few lotteries taking place now and trialing that out. because it is a lottery, right? It is. It doesn't matter how good you are. It just comes down to how the weather was that day. So,
or what sort of publications you have had.
Yeah, and you can't. Not everyone can publish in the top journals, which questionable whether you should aim for that or not. But that is how we're judged. And if you can't do that, you're not going to get a fellowship because you can't show that kind of output. How do we turn all this training and how do we turn all these efforts that are currently going on to focus more on core changes? Or I guess the question is, what do you see as the core changes that need to happen for all of these efforts, whether it's open science or diversity, to be successful?
A lot of community engagement, and I think throughout this episode we've talked about actually seeing science and academia and like research not only just doing science, just not lab work, not just the computer work, but knowing that you have a responsibility in this community to be a nice citizen of this community and support other people, guide other people, mentor other people, and that's a part of the job. And I think we're bad at it. We see that extra work as distracting because it's going to actually reduce your work productivity. We see that as we see that as a path which would not lead you to an academic path, because certain labs, for example, especially for ECRs, they expect, for example, postdocs and PhDs to work like 80 hours per week if they want to be successful in academia, if they want to publish a Nature Science paper during that time. I mean, until we get rid of that episode, we can't we can't really get rid of this. So I think now going back to how we can actually engage more community is something that I think we are trying at the moment in the community in so many different ways. Like Preprints is one of them. It is community engagement in scientific publishing. So that's one way of engaging. eLife is actually reaching out with workshops and putting out resources, engaging with community. This podcast is an example of reaching out to community. And now it is about other ways. I see scientific societies coming in and stepping in and taking more charge there in that sphere. I see more of lab meetings and departments and spaces for such discussions, rather than simply having journal clubs and just scientific talks. Why don't we have talks where we talk about scientific culture and how we should actually make our spaces more better? Let's have, for example, a town hall. Why don't we have more of that? We need more of, it is important for me to know who I work with. I need to know this. I would not be feeling comfortable if they have obnoxious, values which are just, very exclusionary and dipped in privilege, and you do not see any sort of accountability there. So I think, I'm just trying to think of the community engagement in terms of mentorship, which is one of the most critical areas that we, of course, in academia have, because most of the people of color and from other marginalized identities, they tend to actually leave academia because of lack of guidance, lack of support from peer groups. So how we can actually create more of engaging, I guess scientific societies can help, departments and labs can help. I'm open to hearing more ideas from you people as well.
I totally agree, and I want to add what I hear from what Mayank say is that the community involvement creates the structure for people to stay and to apply the things that they learn in open science, for example. So I always say that it's important to have infrastructure for you to exercise the things that you want to exercise in science, the way that you want to do science. And I always see that we teach grad students to do all those open science stuff, but they don't have where to apply it because their lab runs in another way. Their PI don't use reproducible things. They don't want to share the data, and the grad students are all urging to do this open science stuff, but they can't do it because they don't have the infrastructure. So it's something that we need to meet in the middle. We need the up-down, top-bottom decisions and mandates, and someone super powerful saying, hey, we need to do open science, things like that. And we need the grassroots movements and communities exercising and learning this way of doing science. That is not new, but for some cultures it is, because they never had these discussions before. So one thing that I'm trying to do right now is try to focus more on the infrastructure, because I realize I have this consciousness that I am a postdoc. I'm this my second postdoc, and the grad students are just starting. And if I want them to learn these things, I need to make space for them to exercise that. So trying to focus on, for example, the internships that they do, have these internships shaped in a way that they can exercise their scientific skills in an open way. Creating projects where they can really create their own research groups, for example, or these ASAP Bio project that I mentioned earlier, to try to convince the grad schools that open science is a good thing, so the grad students can post preprints and exercise that. So yeah, I totally agree. It's community, infrastructure, and these things go together.
Getting an active community is always challenging. Go on, Sónia.
Sorry, if I can offer my 2 cents, I do agree that we need both bottom-up and top-down approaches. I think the bottom-up is there, right? Just by sitting in this call. I was also an ASAP Bio fellow. Just doing this, you see that the ECRs, they want to change. But I don't see the top-down approach. I don't see really, when you go up and everyone looks like Jonny, the system works for them. So why do they want to change a system that works for them? And I think here is where we need journals like eLife to change, because if journals change, then scientists are forced to change. We need institutions to change, but of course the system also works for the institution, because those professors are the institution. And I think what I miss most is I think we need funders to change. If the funder changes, everyone has to play by their game. And I think this is the real top-down approach, is if the rules of the money change, then this will influence everyone. And for me, this is what I would really like to see.
I've got a friend who we used to work across the hall from each other at Sheffield. He works for one of the funders now, so I'll not name them. But his role there is very much to just try and change things for technicians and postdocs and early career researchers generally. But like you said, if the funders change it, it happens overnight. Everything else follows because it has to follow. But the funders, certainly the ones I've spoken to in the conversations I've had with people in funding bodies, I would describe it as they don't accept their responsibilities because they don't want... It's like when you have an abusive PI, right? The university doesn't do anything. They might do an investigation, but that's just because they've got to. Doesn't actually result in anything happening because that person brings the money in. So why would they? They're a business. The funders won't get involved even though they're the ones providing the money. But if the funders got involved and said, well, we're not going to accept this level of abuse, they shouldn't accept any abuse, but then that person wouldn't be kept at the university anymore. And there was the Wellcome Trust have had a few cases over the past few years in the UK where big-ish named professors have had their funding removed by the Wellcome Trust because they were abusive. They were found to be bullying their staff and students. And if all funders did that, if they all had almost a check in place on the people they fund, that would help change the system massively. And that is your... is this basically what I said to Jessica earlier, is squeezing from the top and the bottom, you squeeze the middle, and the middle can't fight anymore. And it goes, and the changes come through. But it is hard.
Yep. I think I completely agree with what you just said, like all three of you, I think these are critical summary of everything, really. Like I recently, like talking about in the US system, NIH, for example, had a request for information where they reached out to re-envisioning US postdoctoral research. And, as an organization, we ended up submitting a response, and to make it transparent and open, we ended up sharing that on our website. And Jonny, what you just said in terms of if funders could actually check in with the labs, institutions, and departments where they're actually supplying these money and supporting those people, have those regular climate surveys where they're actually checking the well-being, compensation, and other sort of aspects of mentorship, and have that sort of accountability built in. If something goes awry, they basically have to step in and take action. And I think if that accountability comes in, will be a better world. And now second point that I wanted to make in terms of the lack of top-down action is it's sort of ironic or paradoxical, because at the same time, the top-down does not come because people who are sitting at the top, they speak for people who are not in the system. Again, like white men sitting on top of these hierarchies do not have experiences of, for example, black women in America. Neither do they have experiences of more LGBTQ representative or neurodivergent members of the community or disabled members of the community. They do not know. They are even aware of those experiences of people. So until we have those representation at the top powerful level, the change is hard to enact. So I think we need to, as a field, move towards where we appoint our leaders who actually represent a part of the community and, have actually gone through those experiences or, have those solid experiences where people relate to, have gone through those things. And I think that, again, going back to that sort of squeezing top-down and grassroots, ultimately squeezing the middle portion out, just like the orange juice.
Yeah. I think I do like that all the common theme through here is people. It all comes down to people.
Yeah, one thing that I would add is just that we can look at these top-down changes in another way, because I see that we are always on top of something. So sometimes we are top-down even if we are not on the top, that's what I mean. So the change that you can make, being the position that you are, is already something. And then the top-down changes we wait to see.
But this is why you two are both really good examples of that, because you're not at the top, but you're in a position where you're using your position to enact the change you can do and do the bits you can do.
Yeah.
And that feeds down to the people below, who will then either you'll move up or you'll move out, but then somebody else will come in and fill that role as well.
Exactly.
I think one of the big problems we do have in terms of the top-down stuff is the best people leave academia. I'm convinced the best people don't stay. Some of that is because they're forced out. Some of that's because one thing I have found doing so much time thinking about how we do research and the culture we're in, it depresses you. It's really depressing. And the more you find out, the more depressing it gets. Because it is, I think, unless you experience the negative parts, you don't appreciate anywhere near how bad it actually is. And that needs to change as well.
I mean, I think it's just, people like Jonny, like you have heard, I guess, 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times that, oh, you're so negative. You're like focusing only on the negatives and stuff like that. Which, I understand. I think my answer to, those people in that respect is that, as you beautifully pointed out, is there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with me sitting and bawling about my pain and my frustrations. And, you are welcome to join me in my sort of negative sphere. And, if not, then you at least please do not try to sort of look down upon me, right? I mean, this actually helps me see the clearer picture, the real picture. I don't have to live in a blinded state of, sort of persisting, oh, this is great, this is what I've been doing. And I think, I think it just, once again, people being real.
So another common thing both of you mentioned, so I guess this would be a good place to end on. You've both pointed out that mentorship is really, really important. And this is one of the things I've learned as well. The more people you can have who act as your mentors, the better, whether in academia or not. But certainly in a system that doesn't work very well, it's really good to have those. Do you have any tips for people in terms of how to get mentorship, who to seek out as good mentors? What suggestion would you give to those people who are coming up?
That's a difficult question. Because I think the first thing is mentorship is different from advising, right? So one thing is how to find a good advisor. The other thing is how to find a good mentor. For me, I think what worked was being involved in the communities that have the values that are aligned with my own. And then it was supernatural to find mentors there. I had the privilege to have advisors that were also my mentors that I found in these communities. So they were really impactful in my career. So like they boosted the power of advisor, and they are having impacts in my career until this day. So yeah, I would say get involved in the communities, and even if it's not inside academia, outside communities are also super great. And just keep your values in mind, and you will find a mentor. So someone that can not just point you the way, but make you shine, even independent of themselves, or people see you shining because they help you in the basis. It's different. Mentorship, it's a specific kind of way of helping people and making them walk their own path without being all the time, having input and pushing people, because a good mentor will make you shine by yourself.
I think you actually said it nicely. I think it's definitely also for me the value and the need. And I think my only advice would be, of course, like being engaged in the community, but at the same time, do not be afraid of reaching out to people, even if you do not know them. If you feel like this is the person that, sort of, by looking at their website or what they do is something that sort of coincides with your need and your values, please reach out to them. I mean, and if they are, if they have that bandwidth to actually have a chat with you, have a conversation, and maybe to mentor you the way you would want them to, and I think be clear about what you're looking for in terms of the feedback. Is it the scientific feedback? Is it something that you're looking for a true picture of how the atmosphere and ecosystem would be if I go about setting my own lab? Versus, would you have any feedback on how you handled when people in your lab were leaving postdoc for academia? And what was the suggestion you would give them? So I think just being very, very cognizant of your own need and the feedback you would want to have, and not shying away from reaching out.
I've reached out to people I don't know, and it works well. I would add to as general advice with anyone in your life, really, but don't put all your things on one person. Have a mentor who does one thing, and have another one who does something else to help you with something else. And spread it out, because no one's good at everything.
Yeah.
And then you get a lot of input. My PhD supervisor is still someone, if I need help, I can turn to him at any point and he helps me still. And then I've got new ones as I go along. I would also say, don't just look at people above you. People on the same level as you can also be just as helpful.
Yep.
All my friends are scientists most of them are in academia. And, we fight a lot and argue a lot. But when we're not doing that, we're actually quite helpful occasionally to each other. So the support networks, however you get them, are vital.
And also, sometimes, I think looking outside from a non-academic sphere can also be very, very, very useful. Like having a partner or a friend circle and not from academia, which is very interesting and complicated to get around. I understand that, because most of the time if you're spending in the lab sphere, like how are you going to go about like finding friends who are not really academic? But like having that bit of that outer perspective in a circle can really be helpful in terms of how broadly you view yourself as, with respect to your own life and what you want in life and who you are. And that can be very, very instrumental. Like, for example, now, Jonny, like you, I have been also questioning if I would want to be in academia. Like, this is something that has been shifting for me once I got in my postdoc. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I'm having, probably we should chat about that later, is how do you deal with a sense of grief? And I felt like nobody talks about it. Like, since I got on my bachelor's, I always knew what I wanted to do. But now I have a huge sense of grief that I'm anticipating, that I have to let the dream go. And there's an uncertainty of what would happen afterwards, because this is something I've always known. And I think that's hard. How do you deal with that sense of loss? Is like nobody talks about it, and I find it alienating. And I think that's the whole point of creating community.
Yeah. I wrote about that last year, because last year was really when I was going through that grief process. And figuring out that realizing, I guess, that I didn't want to stay. And it took me the whole year to get there. I'm now very happy that I'm not happy that I'm leaving. Like I want to change things. I want to still impact academia. So I'm going to academic adjacent. But it took me a while, and I wrote about it. I've had to put it all behind a paywall so that recruiters can't access it, because it was the usual me fashion of being a bit too honest. But yeah, it's a difficult thing to do. There was a conversation last year, actually. We were going to start a podcast about that, about how to and get a psychologist on to, because it is a grief and it is letting go. Because I think one of the things people don't necessarily appreciate with academia from the outside is it is your life. It isn't just a job, it is a passion. And I hate that people say that, because it's used a lot to justify a lot of the abuse and things that aren't okay. But we are all passionate about what we do. We don't do it for the money, because we don't get paid enough. We do it because we want to help people. And we want to discover new cool things. And that requires passion.
I think, sorry, for me, it's more than just, it's my passion. It's somehow, if you go into this career, it's a part of who you are. It defines you. And when you feel like you're going to leave, you feel like you're going to leave that part of yourself behind. And for me, I've also been struggling with this and thinking about this. I'm starting to shift my way of thinking. I didn't necessarily stop wanting it. I just started to want other things for myself. I outgrew what academia can offer.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of transitioning, even though I am a postdoc. I'm acting as a coordinator, administrator for like 3 years now. And sometimes I talk to my partner and I was like, I don't feel like I'm a scientist. I haven't published in 1 year. I don't know how to do those analyses anymore. And he was like, no, it's because you have this training that you can right now coordinate and propose these ideas for training for grad students. It's because you are a scientist. So I think it's that thing that we as a scientist, we tend to think that we are science, and sometimes we can't dissociate the job from who we are. And we are scientists, but what we do in the lab is just our jobs. And it's okay to leave it. It's okay to leave academia and start doing another thing. And you won't stop being a scientist because of that. You will do other things differently because of your training as a scientist.
I think that's what took me a long time to accept, actually, is that because it is part of who you are. But it's just a value, it's just a mindset, it's not what you're doing. It's not, so I don't have to publish to be a scientist. And we try to get them on, but we've got some great people out there on Twitter who do science, but they're not employed by a university or a research institute. They're just doing it in their garage. It's good science. They're a scientist. But anytime you want to talk about that, happy to talk about it. I can dig all that stuff that's behind a paywall out as well. We do need to end there, though.
Just one final thing, sorry. It's just that I think it was important, the whole conversation about mentorship before. I think that's really important for grad students, especially master students, to learn that it's important to have mentors, and especially mentors that are not your advisors. I think this is something that nobody said that to me, and I found that it was important later on. So grad students, if you're listening to this, find a mentor. And it circles back to the beginning of our conversation on how to balance advocacy and science. It's because those things are the same thing. So finding your community and finding your mentor is part of your training as a scientist. So don't think that as an extra, really.
See that right there is an example of how to do good science communication, do this kind of stuff good, because you just wrapped it up brilliantly there. And that's the show, folks. If you enjoyed listening, then hit that subscribe button to get the latest updates straight to wherever it is you're listening. Don't forget to rate us on Spotify or Apple and follow us on Twitter at MotionPod. You can find links to things we've just discussed on our website, preprintsandmotion.com. If you'd like to tell us what you think, then send an email, shout at us on Twitter, or shout at us if you see us walking down the street. This has been a JMJ production, generously supported by our friends at ASAP Bio. Until next time, have a good week.